Welcome to another weekly featured business brought to you by Visibility Impact and your host, James Moffat, where he will gracefully take our featured guest on a personal and business journey and stories that will inspire, educate, and engage you.
Hello, and welcome to another featured business brought to you by your host, myself, James Moffat. And today we have our 124th guest, Hannah Koch. Welcome, Hannah.
Howdy, glad to be here.
All right. So, Hannah, we're going to take you on a journey from your childhood to where you are now, touching on any memorable experiences that you wish to share. And let's just see how it goes. So feel free to digress, because the floor is yours and it's all about you. So anyone listening to the recording afterwards, it is available on YouTube and Spotify. And yeah, all the contact details and the links will be made available afterwards. So you can see those and obviously reach out to myself, but in particular to Hannah. So Hannah, let's get going.
Let's do it. I'm ready.
Right. So I always start off by asking my guests, where are they living now and where are they originally from?
All right. Well, I live in the beautiful town of Boulder, Colorado, here by divine intervention and pure choice. And then I grew up about 40 minutes north up in Fort Collins, Colorado. And that's where I lived pretty much my whole life. I went to college up there, did a little detour out to the Bay Area after college, and then now I'm here, grateful to be in Boulder.
Excellent. It's actually a place I've not been to. I mean, I traveled a lot around the US, and I've been on the East Coast, the West Coast, up and down California Coastal Highway. And my sister actually lives in Florida. I've been there many times, but I've never been to Colorado.
Oh, it is beautiful. I highly recommend. A lot of people say, stop moving here. Everyone's moving here from Texas and California. And I don't have the same sentiment. I think everybody should come. They should move here. This is a playground. There's biking trails, hiking trails, skiing. There's really anything you want. And I love meeting people that aren't from here.
Excellent. So we were talking before the show. So you're very much an outdoor person.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So,
I feel like I grew up outside, basically. I was always outside as a kid, and I feel most at home in nature. So definitely an outdoors person.
Right. So growing up then as a kid, have you got any siblings?
I don't. I'm an only child. My mom had me when she was 40. So
Wow.
I was the only she could have.
Yeah. And what a beautiful child she had.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Right. So your parents live there as well? I mean, near you?
Yes. So my dad lives in the childhood home that I grew up in, about 40 minutes away. And then my mom, unfortunately, she passed in 2020. So she is no longer with us, but she is here with me in spirit. And her and my dad lived in that house the whole time, stayed married for 27 years. And yeah, stuck it out together. So.
Right. Sorry about your mum.
Thank you.
Right. So a beautiful place to be. So then growing up, I mean, most of my guests, actually, I asked the same question and everybody says nature. They say they love being in the nature, in the forest, hiking, biking, whatever. And I see that you also do water sports.
I do some water sports being scuba diving. So I love scuba diving. I tried my hand at surfing, and I much prefer to be underwater.
Right. So you did scuba dive, and where did you do that first?
So I actually got certified here in Colorado, which sounds crazy because there's no really water here in Colorado. It's a desert. But I got a certification here at a PADI school. And there's actually a ton of dive centers in Colorado just because everyone here loves to do outside things. And then I got the official certification in Hawaii. So my dad is really passionate about scuba diving. He did it throughout college and had a bunch of different jobs where it required him to scuba dive. And he wanted to do it as like a dad-daughter experience. And he wanted my first dive to be really amazing. I would have had the option to go here to Carter Lake, which is kind of a murky lake. And he's like, no, I don't want her to think that's what scuba diving is. So he took us to Hawaii, and that's where my first dive was. I've done a ton of diving in Hawaii. I've done some diving in Belize, Honduras, Grand Cayman. I've done a lot of diving around different places in Mexico, and then tried to dive in Costa Rica, but the water was super murky down there. It wasn't the best time of the year, so I didn't see too much, but would love to return to that area. And have also dove off the coast of Ecuador. So
wow,
all around. Yeah.
right. So you're quite a keen diver then.
I love it. It's
Do you
amazing.
still do it now?
I do. The last dive was last July, and it was in La Paz, Mexico. And it was beautiful. I saw schools of fish that were thousands and thousands of fish wide. I hadn't ever seen that before. Did some canyon diving, did my first wreck dive, which was an interesting experience. It didn't go very well. So I don't know if I'm going to do future wreck dives, but next up, I definitely want to do some cave diving and some night diving. And I would love to swim with whale sharks.
Right. And your dad was your partner, for the first dive?
He was my partner for the first dive, which was really special. I'm very grateful to have shared that experience with him. It was kind of like seeing him in this new cool light where I was like, oh, my dad does cool things. And that's when I was, I think, 19. And then we went to the Cayman Islands shortly after that. And that was great as well. My very, very first dive was actually before I got certified, and that was in Mexico. And they don't require a certification. And no one told me that I had to keep breathing with my regulator in, especially when I go up. And so I went up and I had held my breath and I could feel my lungs tear a little bit. And thankfully we weren't too far underwater, but I did cough up some blood, and glad that I actually got certified, because it can be dangerous.
No, definitely. I did a little bit of it.
Where at?
Where was it? Where did I do first? The first one was in Bermuda.
Oh, amazing.
I went over there for a friend's wedding, and we had a chance hanging around and do different things. And my girlfriend at the time said, let's go diving. I thought, well, I don't know how to dive. And I wasn't a particularly good swimmer. So I was really against it. I would rather lie on the beach. But she insisted that I went. So we learned a bit on the beach, like how to put the respirators on and everything, how to clear the water out your goggles. And then we went on a boat like 3 miles out. And then we went down, 10 meters. I think for the first dive, I think there's a limit. I think we were right on that limit.
Mm-hmm.
And then we went off the back of the boat. So you had a choice, like just go backwards or step down into it. But I remember putting the tank on my back and then standing up on the boat with flippers on, right? That was a job in itself, like tripping over the flippers. The feeling the weight of the tank on your back, and then trying to step off the step at the end of the boat I think that was the hardest bit. The actual diving seemed easier because you don't feel that weight when you're in the water.
Yeah,
and
you become like this.
But it was great. We went down in pairs as well, and then they had an instructor at the bottom and one at the top, and then the boat kind of disappeared and then came back later. And we had a rope that we followed the rope down, and we had to know the signals, like everything okay, and then at the bottom we had to get the water out of your goggles. And it was your very first one. You're very apprehensive, and
yes.
Like exactly what you said about breathing. They're telling you just breathe normally, right? And I'm thinking, what is normal now? I'm forgetting how to breathe, because you're kind of holding your breath. And I think, no, just do it normally. And once you get kind of over that shock, it's magical. It's the most beautiful experience. So that was the first dive. And then we did one out again, like in the Caribbean. We went to another girlfriend I had, not the same time. She lived in Curaçao. So,
wow.
One of the Dutch Antilles. So we just walked out on the beach and we went there. And as far out as we could go, that we could have the same experience. That was a bit different from snorkeling. because we stayed under the water and went deeper. But I loved it, really. I mean, it's like being in a big fish tank.
There's a whole other world down there that is just beautiful. It's so beautiful. And you get to see all these little creatures that you would never get to experience. And I'll never forget the first time that I did a wall dive. We were in the Caymans and I was looking down. We were about 30 feet down, and the water, I mean, you could see 100 feet down. It was beautiful. And there was fan coral that was 7 feet tall. And I'm looking at all these beautiful creatures, all these fish, and then we're like slowly making our way towards the wall. And I didn't really know what to expect. And all of a sudden the reef stops and there's just nothing below me. And that's the first time when I had dove where there was nothing below me, but just hundreds of feet of water. And I'll never forget the feeling my body felt. I think my human traits were like, wait, this is not okay. I shouldn't be here. Help. And it was definitely a moment of panic, but then just a lot of reverence and respect for how large the ocean is. And then you turn around and you look at the wall and there's just rock lobsters that are rainbows. Basically, they're beautiful creatures, and all these other new creatures, octopus and all the things. And it was special. So I recommend everybody try scuba diving.
No, it's definitely a magical experience.
Mm-hmm.
Did you ever come across any dolphins when you were out?
I did come across dolphins. I dove in the Florida Keys and there were quite a few dolphins and I think seals or sea lions, and they are so playful. They just know that we're people and that we're not going to harm them when we're under there with our tanks. And they're very curious. And I didn't know how to feel about it at first, but I got pretty close to some dolphins.
Excellent. So to keep your petty, do you have to do so many dives a year or anything?
Yeah, so you have to do at least one dive with a dive master. Some places say every 2 years. Some places say every year. So I don't know exactly the regulation on it. I try to dive at least once a year to make sure I'm up on my certification. And if I can't, I at least try to do a pool dive or something like that. And then I log it so that when I travel and I go abroad and they say, I need to see your last logged dive, that I'm all good and I don't have to do some dive before that.
Excellent. Anyway, let's kind of move on from that because we could talk about that for a long time. You also do horse riding.
I do. So I don't currently ride. I'm trying to find a stable up here, but I grew up loving horses. I was obsessed with them when I was little. And I found riding when I was about 6 years old. And that was just immensely helpful in my confidence as like a young child to be able to, I think, to control and take care of such a large animal made me a more confident human. So I got into dressage and then a little bit of hunter jumper. So I was doing some show jumping. And I would say now I'm just casual trail riding. If I go horseback riding abroad, I'm usually trying to like gallop down a beach, and that's just what I do nowadays. So
gallop down the beach, get on your speedboat with your snorkeling gear, and off you go. You sound like a James Bond girl.
Oh, I would hope so. I try to live my life a little bit like that. That's exciting, right?
Yeah. Anyway, so my daughter, I mean, she's 7. And she did horse riding for the first time a couple of weeks ago. And she absolutely loved it. She spent 5 hours out there. I mean, it was a kind of a school thing. And I mean, then she went on several different horses. And then you clear them out. They had their babies as well. So, I mean, there was lots of little horses running around. So it was like 17 horses there or something. And she absolutely loved it. And she when I went to pick her up, she said, "Daddy, can we have a horse?" I thought, yeah, a cat is hard enough.
It's hard when your daughter asks even for a cat or a dog, and you think like, well, a horse is 100 times more expensive than that. But sure.
Yeah. But I mean, horses need to be ridden. So I mean, you could probably find the stables where people have horses that they'll be happy for you to ride the horse.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I used to lease a horse. So somebody that wasn't there all of the time, I would go and ride their horse for them rather than owning a horse, just because I think it's more cost effective. I love that your daughter is into that. It's amazing that we can ride an animal in general. Like, what other animal can you do that with? You can't. So I think it's a special bond that humans have with horses.
Yeah. I mean, I did it, so I can't say no to her.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, I started quite late, but when I lived in the UK, so I saw stables and it was beautiful. And I went there and yeah, I asked the owner if it was possible to learn how to ride a horse. And she said yes, but after my first lesson, she said, I'm going to teach you to do jumping. And then I want you to take out the new people that come to do horse riding. And I thought, oh, shit, kind of thing. But anyway, and that's what I did. And then all the new people that came, I took them out and I took them up. It was kind of not a mountain, but a big hill. And you'd have to go through the gate. So you had to open the gate whilst on the horse, get the others to go through, get your horse through, and then close the gate. And great fun, then gallop across the top. Yeah. And great fun. And then when I moved to Switzerland, I had the chance to go to Spain for a week, horse riding. And then you'd stay there all week and just ride horses every day. And that was magical as well. So I can see the attraction like with horses. And I can't say no to any of my kids that would like to ride a horse because it is a really special and magical feeling.
It is. Definitely.
That bond you get with a horse as well. Mm-hmm. I mean, I call her the horse whisperer because the horses seem to like her. And rubbing their nose against her and like trying to push her over. Like, I said that she was like the child horse whisperer, but maybe she is. So anyway, so let's learn a bit more about you. So your kind of education and stuff growing up. Mm-hmm. What did you like, or what did you study?
Education growing up. What did I study? I mean, I was always really into math. So my dad was really, really good and really into math, and he was an engineer. So I always loved more of the science-based stuff. And then I was really into writing. I wanted to be a writer when I was younger. I would stay in from recess time just to write pages of fiction books in my notebooks. So that's kind of more elementary school. When I got older, I wanted to be a veterinarian because everybody does. And then after that, I thought maybe I'll go into the medical field and be an anesthesiologist. And I wanted to do that purely from money standpoint. I knew that anesthesiologists made quite a bit of money and I didn't want to be a lawyer. And then when I got into college, I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I thought I wanted to do something in the arts, such as photography or something more like psychology. And my dad really pushed me into business and said, I think that this is really going to suit you later on in life. This is what I highly recommend. And so I went into business and I went to the business school at Colorado State University and majored in international business with a certification concentration in negotiation and conflict management. I wanted to be a hostage negotiator, but I later learned that I didn't want to do a long stint in the police force and I didn't want to work for the government. And I didn't have any connections to get into any of the private hostage negotiator training programs. So I kind of pivoted and went into software sales. And now I ended up in sales operations.
Interesting about hostage negotiator, because living in Switzerland, I mean, you have the UN here. So I wanted to be a peace negotiator, right? And go to these kind of war-torn countries and actually stand there and try and help them discuss and agree to move forward without any violence. Mm-hmm. But the application and the certificates and that you needed to apply, then I didn't have. So I couldn't do it. So even though you had the passion for wanting to do it, you couldn't. And then I felt kind of disheartened in the way that surely something like that, it should be the passion and the kind of something that's so meaningful that you really want to help, rather than, you've got a degree in something that would that actually work when you're in front of a conflict. And then I started looking into kind of these NGO organizations, and I thought it completely changed my opinion on all of them, right? And surely if you want to help, all right, I mean, you can't just walk in there blindly, you'll be shot. But I mean, that you could learn something and do it in a different way. It's like saying you can't be a TV presenter or something because you don't have that skill, but you have to learn that skill somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of people start off kind of with podcasts or radio shows, or podcasts, then radio, and then TV or whatever. But yeah, if you've got the desire and the passion for it, then yeah, everything is possible.
I think so. I think my main motivation for going, I never wanted to really go to college. I was kind of raised where college was, it wasn't not an option to go to college. Like I had to go to college. That's how I was raised. But when it came time to go to college, I really didn't want to. I thought, I'm just conforming to what society thinks I should be doing. I think I can set out to do more than this. And I'm glad that I did it. But my main motivation for going to college, as I said, if I'm going to go to college and get a 4-year degree, it's to join the Peace Corps and get a better ranking position in the Peace Corps. That was like my main motivation. And when I kind of started to go through college, I ended up liking a lot of my courses and ended up deciding the Peace Corps wasn't the way. And I also didn't want to join the Peace Corps after doing a lot of research. No dig on the Peace Corps, but I think that my skills are better served going into like small farms and serving what those people need rather than perhaps pushing what I thought was an agenda of somebody else, so to speak. And so I just decided that program wasn't for me. But the art of the possible when you go to college or not, like really anything is out there if you want it.
I think you've kind of hit the nail on the head there. I want to do something that resonates with me. If I was out there and they said, yeah, you've got all the qualifications, go out there and help with the peace, right? To whose agenda am I doing it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that would be the thing. I would go out there wanting to be neutral, but there's never neutrality. There's an agenda for one side or the other.
Yeah.
And yeah, once you see that, then it's not for me. So, but anyway, what you do now for business?
What do I do now for business? So right now I work at a software company based out of the Bay Area. We sell subscription management software, and I work in the sales enablement team. So I basically train our salespeople how to sell our product. I onboard them, I welcome to the company, and make sure that they have everything that they need to feel set up and ready to sell. And it doesn't sound like a necessarily glamorous job, but I love my job. And it's because of the people that I get to work with. They're so smart. I learn something from somebody every single day. So I feel blessed that the first job that I chose right out of college, I ended up really loving. And that's kind of what I do for business today. And then I would say more so on the side, I also teach yoga. I support different yoga retreats, wellness retreats, where I go and I cook for a variety of people, anywhere between like 10 to 20 individuals, lead yoga workshops. And
right, let me just hold you there. So just going back to the company you work for in the Bay Area, I mean,
yeah.
It's a software as a service type company, or what type of company?
It is. It's a software as a service type company. So basically you can think about us sitting between our CRM and an ERP, and we connect the different integrations in order to support the subscriber financial data for all types of different subscription services, whether they're B2C or B2B or B2Any. And we basically support them in business model transformation and scaling their subscriber base.
Right. Yeah, I worked in the Bay Area for many software as a service companies as well.
And how was that for
you? Yeah, sorry?
How was that for you?
Yeah, I loved it. I mean, we'd fly into San Francisco, and then we'd go to either San Jose, which was one of the places, or Redwood City, and anyway, kind of lots of places there. And I even worked for a company down in Santa Barbara, which was beautiful. So driving down the Californian coastal highway was amazing, right? In a Mustang, had to be in a Mustang. Right?
Amazing.
I just digressing a bit. We'd go for sales meetings, so I'd have to fly over there, and because the location, sometimes you had to hire a car. So I'd hire the car, and it gave you the list. So I thought, it's got to be a Mustang. So if you go to the US, it's got to be a Mustang if you like that sort of thing. So that's what I put down when I got there. They said, here's your car, a Nissan. I said, a Nissan? Well, that's not American muscle car. Right? I said, I wanted a Mustang. They said, it says all equivalent. I said, well, that's not equivalent.
No way.
Right. Yeah. So anyway, I did get my Mustang in the end. And yeah, that was kind of a movie experience. I mean, you're driving down the coastal highway and in your Mustang. But
every time I go to California and I rent a car, I rent a Mustang and I make sure it's convertible. And I just think that it's so fun because that's not a car that I would drive in my daily life here in Colorado. I think that would be everyone here drives a Subaru. But yeah, every time we go to California, you got to have a fun car. And
exactly.
Santa Barbara is beautiful. The weather's beautiful.
Yeah, it's not as if I'm going there every week. And it's not as if it's like, as you said, it's not my day-to-day car. It's just a one-time kind of bit of fun.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So
that's what life is about, having fun.
Exactly. And if you can mix fun with work, right, then even better. So did you want to plug your company or?
That's a great question. No, I won't plug our company here. I think that that'll serve a different audience. But if you're interested in, you can just search B2B subscription management software and we'll pop up there, the number one in the Gartner quadrant.
Yeah, I understand what you're talking about because, I come from a technology background, but I worked for many, many years with software as a service sales. I mean, VP of sales or head of marketing or whatever combination. So I know. It was actually that type of company that I would represent in Europe. And I would be their kind of European person.
That's great.
So are you in Europe?
So I wish. I actually got to go to London last August, which was awesome. We have offices in London, in Paris, Chennai, Sydney, and then we have our San Francisco and Boston office. Okay. So I work remote, thankfully, out of Colorado. Used to work at a San Francisco office, but I did get to go to our Europe office last August, and it was awesome. London was a beautiful city, and I would love to go back.
Yeah. And then when you're coming this way, come to Switzerland as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I hope to get to Switzerland soon.
Yeah, there's lots to see here. You just need deep pockets and lots of money.
Yes, I'll make it work. I'm more of like a hostel traveler when I travel. So hotels are nice, but I really appreciate the backpacker style and being typically I pick like an 8-bedroom all-female dorm, and that affords me, if I'm in Thailand, it's $8 a night. If I'm in Switzerland, it's probably $90 a night, and that's cheap in Switzerland for somewhere, but it helps me meet friends and people, and it kind of just percolates new adventure ideas.
Yeah. Actually, because you're my 124th guest, right? I've had guests from all over the world. I was thinking I could just go on one everlasting holiday, right? I could just go and visit all the different guests. And then I'm sure they would say, yes, of course you can stay with me. So then I just go make a route of where they live around the world because they're from everywhere, right? Yeah. I mean, you mentioned Mexico. Yeah, in Mexico, in Canada, in the US, I mean, in Australia, New Zealand, I mean, all over the place, right? Yeah. So, and then travel the world and just keep going.
Whenever I save somebody's contact information in my phone from meeting them in a hostel, I make sure that I put the city and the state or country that they live in, so that when I'm traveling, I can search and see if I have anybody's phone number from Spain. And if they're there, then we can go ahead and meet up, and hopefully they can be my local tour guide. And that served me really well in my travels.
Yeah, I think that's great. Yeah. It's a new way of traveling.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. So anyway, moving on to the yoga then. So you're a yoga teacher.
I am a yoga teacher, yes. Certified 200-hour yoga teacher. And will start additional training towards my 300-hour, continue additional training towards my 300-hour here in May. And that would be great to eventually work towards a 500-hour. And then hopefully one day I will teach other teachers how to be yoga teachers.
Right. And how long have you been doing yoga?
I've been doing yoga for about a decade now, which is kind of crazy to say, but I found it when I was 18, and it's been a beautiful, beautiful experience and has brought me home to a lot of different parts of myself. So yeah, about 10 years.
Yeah. My mum used to do yoga, so she used to teach us like to sit in the lotus position, right, when watching TV on the floor. And I remember I could never get the second leg up, right, and to cross. But then once you do it enough times, you can do it. And then we used to walk around on our knees, right?
Yeah, that's some old school yoga.
Yeah, and then lift yourself up like off the ground. But,
yeah, I would say that nowadays, and people think about yoga and they think just about the postures, right? Which can sometimes be really hard to get into. You see all these people on Instagram who have their leg pulled over their head or are in full splits. And there's 8 limbs of yoga, and the asanas, meaning the postures, is just one limb of yoga. So yoga is not limited to just poses. You don't have to be flexible to come to a yoga class. Oftentimes now, I would say in public classes, I've seen a huge transformation in the accessibility in public classes where people aren't, being instructed to go into lotus pose. It's really hard on your hip flexors and your knees and all kinds of things. And it's definitely much more accessible now than I think even when I used to start doing yoga. And I really appreciate that. So you might take like an Ashtanga course or a level 3 course where they're asking you to, push up off the ground while your feet are in lotus position and stuff. And that's totally great for people that want to do it, but it's much more accessible than that now.
No, I thought if that is yoga, it's too painful for me.
And that is not what we want. It doesn't have to be that way.
Yeah. I mean, I like to do things like that because I find that if you sit too long at your desk, and we tend, particularly if you work remotely, spend way too many hours sitting, and that's really not good for your posture, right? So to become flexible or to move can be painful. So you need to kind of loosen up and everything and do some kind of movement. So I wasn't really keen on yoga, but I did do Pilates.
Nice. Pilates.
Yeah. I actually, a friend said to me, let's go and do Pilates. I thought, well, never heard of it. And he says, like yoga. No, not for me. But anyway, we ended up doing it. And then I was asked, how flexible am I? And I said, well, I can go next Tuesday. Always joking about, I mean, yeah. And so I used to joke with people, I can stand on my hands. And they said, oh, can you? And I said, yeah, of course I can stand on my hands. So I just bent down and put my foot under my hand and said, look, I'm standing on my hands.
Amazing. Yes. And that's totally actually a yoga posture too, gorilla pose. It's great.
So anyway, we're moving on. Right. So yoga, you combine that with anything else?
Yeah. Often I combine yoga, so the asanas, with meditation. Definitely sitting in silence, I think, is really important. That's a way to connect to the divine through spirit rather than your body. And then yoga and breath work go hand in hand. So a lot of different upregulated and downregulated breathing techniques. Yeah, I would say sometimes I incorporate sound bowls. I mean, yoga can be as expansive or not as expansive as you want. I think people sometimes get deterred from yoga because of the spiritual aspect, and you can totally go to core power yoga where it's more focused on the workout aspect of it. And that's great. That's moving your body in a way that serves you. And that's wonderful. I would say I definitely incorporate yoga more from like a spirit and ethereal perspective. So yeah, it can be incorporated into a lot of things.
Right. Excellent. So there's a few other areas I want to touch on as well. Yeah. So, I mean, I just for the audience, I mean, I send out a questionnaire beforehand just so we can steer the conversation. So there's a lot of things and maybe way too many things that I actually discuss in a call, depending on how detailed we go into that subject. But there's a few things that I think will be a natural flow here. So you also talk about mushrooms.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Is it more microdosing, or is there another name for it?
Yeah, so mushrooms being the psilocybin kind, that produces psychoactive effects. I talk about it in the context of microdosing. Microdosing is great. I also talk about it in the context of macrodosing. So you have kind of like your recreational mushrooms where maybe people are taking them at a concert or going to a museum or seeing, type of music. Maybe they're incorporating them into yoga. And then you also have the therapeutic aspect where maybe people are taking it for PTSD, depression. Maybe they're doing it in a ceremonial setting. And then I just had a great conversation the other day that actually talked about, we don't have to bucket it as recreational or spiritual, because where are the lines actually blurred? A recreational experience can turn into a spiritual experience and vice versa. So I talk about it in all kinds of different contexts.
Right.
And functional mushrooms, the kinds that don't make you trip, the lion's mane you can put in your coffee and all the things.
Exactly. So maybe you can educate me and the audience. So a previous guest, which she was a guest on the show, 𝗙𝗘𝗧𝗨𝗥𝗘𝗗, and she talks about microdosing. Now, I'd heard the expression, but I had no idea what it was. So then she explained. So can you, just for the audience and also for my benefit, you talked not just about micro, but you talked about macro as well. So, and recreational and more medicinal purposes. So maybe you can just give us a quick overview as an understanding. And also when it comes to mushrooms, there's so many different types, I guess. And then what's the difference between a mushroom and a toadstool?
Okay. Yes, I can try to answer that one. That might be more for a mycologist, but I'll do my best answer.
And
so,
also, sorry. Yeah. And then how did you get into it?
Yes, that'll be a whole story as well. So for the audience, microdosing, caveat here, right? Every dose and what each individual's body needs is going to be a little bit different, but there's general guidelines for each of these. So microdosing is typically anywhere between 0.1 and up to maybe 0.3, or for larger individuals, 0.5 grams. So it's a pretty small amount. And basically the goal sometimes of microdosing is that it should be sub-perceptual. So it's kind of like a take it and forget it. Like, as an example, if I microdose, I can drive, I can go to the grocery store, I might feel a little bit fuzzy or feel and notice different things in my body, but ultimately I'm going around my day-to-day just as I normally would. There's no visuals, I'm feeling pretty good. And so that's a really small amount. And from there, you kind of have like what some people like to call a museum dose, which could be anywhere from 0.5 to 1.5 grams. And that might be where you're, like it says, going to a museum and looking at art and you're feeling a little bit more. You might really start to get more activated in your body, maybe a little bit of visual activation where colors seem really, really bright to you, et cetera. And then upwards of 1.5 grams. And again, this could be different depending on who you ask, but these are the guidelines that we give in a psilocybin peer support program that I co-created. So from there, you're typically looking at something that's more of a macrodose journey. I would say from what I've seen and personally experienced, macrodose journeys are 3 grams and up, depending on the individual. And those are experiences where you're connecting with something that is typically perhaps greater than you. You're going inside your body. There's lots of visuals if you do not have an eye mask on. If you do have an eye mask on, sometimes there's still a lot of visuals, and you're typically having a much deeper, ethereal experience.
Right. You mentioned something, eye mask. Mm-hmm. Is this recommended when you have higher dosage?
Great question. So it really depends on what you want to get out of an experience. Some people might be taking that amount and they might want to really be looking at nature, and that's totally great. I think that more often these days, people are looking for a deeply therapeutic and spiritual experience. Like Michael Pollan in his book, How to Change Your Mind, for an example, talks a lot about this. And I think that's kind of what sparked people's interest. And so what you can do is you can find somebody who's a guide, and depending on where you live and the regulations, this might be underground and illegal, or it might be legal in order to find somebody that is basically a trip sitter. So they're sitting with you during your experience, and You typically have an eye mask on. A lot of people have headphones on in which they're listening to a playlist. And just that kind of allows people to go inwards and experience what's coming up for them.
Wow. Mm-hmm. So you also, I mean, prior to the show, you mentioned about sound. I think you also mentioned it here. Your sound. So sound and resonance and frequency, this comes into it as well, because I'm just thinking, if you're listening to music, then you want to listen to it at the right frequency. Mm-hmm. Because there is a frequency, I mean, different frequencies for different healing.
There is, like, for example, each chakra. So you have, if you believe in this or have looked into it, in yoga, they focus on the chakra systems. So there's 7 chakras within your body, starting from your root chakra all the way up to your head, which is your crown chakra, and each one vibrates at a different frequency. So if people really want to get into it, I mean, you can find entire playlists that are tuned to a specific frequency to help you focus on, say, like the heart chakra. Or I think the root chakra starts pretty low at like 432 or a little bit lower in the 300s. So yeah, it just depends on what you want to work on. You know, there's also tuning forks that people have that are tuned to different frequencies and vibrations that can help move energy around. So
do you think that would enhance the feeling? I mean, if you were having that frequency at the same time, say you had headphones on and a blindfold and you had that frequency pulsating or that sound. Yeah. You think that would stimulate it further?
It's a good question. You know, I personally think so. I typically meditate to different frequency sounds such as that. And I think that it helps me connect with different chakras in my body. That's how I've done a lot of my healing work, is through that. And I think that it helps me go deeper. Again, it could be the placebo effect, which is just as valuable as anything else. But yeah, I think so. And I think especially what matters most in what you said is its intention, right? So you're picking a frequency based on something you want to work on, something you want to go deeper with. And that intention is going to maybe perhaps matter even more than the frequency and allow you to drop into that.
Yeah, I was just thinking, I mean, you mentioned the different chakras, and I mean, your heart chakra, whatever frequency, I think it's 528, but I might be wrong. If you could listen to 528 sound, and you want to focus on your heart, then to me, it just makes common sense or is logical that it's going to give you a better effect than if you listen to maybe just regular music and wanted to focus on your heart.
Yeah. And I think just the focus on the heart in general is going to help in whatever you're looking to heal or work on.
Yeah. I mean, this fascinates me a lot. I mean, I could talk all day about these kind of things and really love it, because growing up as a kid, when you're exposed to, I mean, as I said, my mum used to do yoga and she was a yoga teacher, but kind of the old school. And I thought it was just about the body and funny positions that I could never do anyway. My arms and legs wouldn't go there. Right. And that's kind of what I grew up thinking. But then I didn't see kind of another side to it. And it wasn't until later that you start joining kind of these dots together. And I mean, if you mention chakra to me, then I think, what are you talking about? And how is that connected to moving your body? Mm-hmm. But it's not until when you're older and you start understanding everything is connected. And yeah, the sound, the body, the way we think, the consciousness, the inner work, the outer work, and everything else, then it starts to, I get it. Kind of get it now.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that I have dove down a rabbit hole in so many of those areas. And one thing I find really interesting, going back to the microdosing topic, is, you know, people, they'll say, you know, I don't know much about yoga or meditation or these more ethereal, I don't know, intangible items. And I always tell people, like, you don't have to know anything about those worlds in order for microdosing to benefit you. You know, I think it's a thing that people in the yoga community and people who are into spirituality really get into, but you don't have to be any of that to enjoy microdosing. Creatives enjoy microdosing. I know that my dad and his best friend enjoy microdosing, and they're not into any of that. And so I think microdosing is really accessible for so many different people, spiritual or not.
Uh, so you mentioned about in some places it's kind of underground and it's banned, and in other places not. So where you live, is it open and acceptable?
Great question. So we passed a decriminalization act here in the Denver area last year, which is absolutely wonderful, meaning that police are not going to pursue charges on a variety of different plant medicines, including psilocybin. And then later in the coming years, other medicines such as like ayahuasca, DMT, ibogaine might be added to that decriminalization list. And so it is openly talked about. I would say that I am particularly lucky in that living in Boulder, Colorado, we have Naropa University, which is very spirit-based, and it's talked about all the time. There's a huge Burning Man community here in which psychedelics are really integrative. So it comes up in all of my conversations, and I don't feel like I have to hide that part of me. But I would say same with San Francisco. But if I go somewhere, perhaps back east where my parents are from, or Iowa, for example, it's nothing that I'm necessarily going to strike up a conversation with a stranger about.
Right. Excellent. So I want to find out how you got involved and what was your first experience, and tell me about, I mean, why did you do it? Did you do it for recreational purposes or something else? And how did you get involved? And then was that, from your experience, something that you thought, wow, this is great, I want to do it again? Or share with that.
Great question. So no to that last part. And I'm excited to get into this. The first time I did mushrooms, I thought to myself, I am never doing that again. I was 18 and I was painting the kitchen with a boyfriend that I was living with. And he kind of just out of the blue said, hey, I have these mushrooms. Do you want to try some? And I knew nothing about mushrooms, but at that time I was trying a lot of different things. And so I said, sure. Didn't know how much I was eating, just ate a bunch of them. And about an hour later, really started to feel pretty funny. Couldn't paint the kitchen anymore. I went and sat outside, kind of saw the grass breathing, and I thought like, oh, this is pretty cool. My dad called me and he had gotten the results from a dentist appointment that I recently went to. And I had a few cavities. And he jokingly said, I think all your teeth are going to fall out. And at that point, I was tripping pretty hard. And I took that very seriously. And I hung up the phone and I had a full-blown panic attack. I thought I was dying. I thought all my teeth were going to fall out. I ran and hid under the covers. And mind you, as I'm saying this, this is not a typical experience. I'm not trying to scare your listeners, and I will share some beautiful experiences that I have had. But I hid under the covers, and the voices that be, whatever that was at the time, said, you have to get off your antidepressants. I was on a lot of Paxil and Xanax at the time, and you have to. Yeah.
On antidepressants at 18?
Yes, I was on antidepressants at 18. I was like clinically depressed. Life was not going the way that I had anticipated.
At such a young age?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I started them at 17. Wow. It took me a while to get off till I was 19, but it said I had to get out of my current relationship. I was not in a good relationship. And so the trip ended. I was fine. There was nothing inherently wrong with what was going on. It was all in my head. And that speaks a lot to.
So that was, sorry to interrupt. Yeah, I mean, that was more kind of macro dosing for the first time rather than micro.
Yes. I had no idea how much I was taking. And I think that speaks a lot to educating people on how much they're taking, talking to them about their mindset in which they are taking them in the setting. So none of that was going well for me. So there was no intention behind it, which is, I think, largely why I had a pretty scary experience. And I was on SSRIs, so serotonin reuptake inhibitors. And those can have a very interesting effect on the serotonin in your brain and the way that psilocybin interacts with.
So you're already on medication when you took this?
Yes.
And overdosed on it, basically.
I wouldn't say I overdosed. You can't really.
I mean, you had an amount that, I mean, you're not used to it. It's your first time and you've gone kind of macro rather than micro.
It was definitely a shock to my nervous system. I will say that. So after that, I don't know what it was, but I listened to whatever I had heard, whether it was in my brain or something beyond me. And I ended up weaning off my antidepressants. I got out of that relationship and moved into my own apartment. And at this time I was getting into college and starting to integrate there. And I said, I'm never doing another psychedelic. So fast forward 2 years, I was on a camping trip with some friends,
Hey,
and
mate, let me just ask a question. Your teeth look perfect.
yeah, they stayed in my mouth, surprisingly, despite the fact I thought they were all going to fall out. And I got those cavities filled, and all was well.
That was good.
Yeah. And so I was on this camping trip with some friends, and they had some LSD, and they said, "Do you want to try some?" And I was pretty hesitant based on my last experience, but I said, "Sure." And they said, "What is your intention for the day?" And I didn't know how to set an intention. So I just said, "I want to see a moose." And they're like, "Oh, haha, like we're not going to see a moose. That's like far and few between." And it was one of the most beautiful experiences of my life. We did see a moose. We saw a mama moose and her baby. And that experience told me that something was listening. And it was one of the most spiritual experiences that I had had to that point. And at that point, I knew that there was something more here. I had so many insights on that LSD experience.
Oh, and sorry, just a question there before I forget. When you have an experience or someone takes you on a trip, can they have the same experience, or is it like not possible? You have your own experience.
That is a great question. I think it's not necessarily one or the other. I think it's both and. I think you are having the same experience in the fact that you're inhabiting the same space and your body is on the same substance. But I think that based on all of the inputs you've received throughout your life. I'm just
thinking, you mentioned about a moose, and then you see a mother moose and the baby moose.
Yeah.
Right. Then someone with you, could they be, because I mean, completely digressing, my eldest son's just had a program where he had hypnotherapy.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Mm-hmm. But him and his hypnotherapist went on the same journey together. They could visualize the same thing. So I'm just wondering if that's possible to do this.
You know, I haven't heard of somebody visualizing the same thing at the same time as other individuals, but I'm sure it's possible, and I'm sure there's people out there.
Just on that note, actually, my previous guest, right, who's an authority in lucid dreaming, right? I mean, we're talking about dreamers and different layers and levels of dreams that you can go into. And I shared a story that we were in the US, in Philadelphia, and this was many years ago when I was 17, and went with the family, and we all slept in different bedrooms, and there was dream catchers in every bedroom. And I remember coming downstairs for breakfast, and I could hear my sister and my mum talking to the lady who was hosting us, talking about a dream, and they were sharing in explicit detail the dream, and they're both saying that, carrying on the story of the dream, right? And then as I was walking downstairs, I had that dream. I had that dream last night as well. So then I continued the story, and they said, "How did you have the same dream?" And then we asked my brother when he got up, and her son, and everybody had the same dream. So that's what makes me think that anything is possible. So if you're on a trip together, then I have no idea. I'm kind of making this up as I go, but I wouldn't be surprised that you couldn't all have the same, not just the experience, the physical experience, but also the mind or the consciousness or the dream or whatever experience as well.
I mean, I have definitely heard of, people talk about the concept of the hive mind. And when people are sitting in medicine circles, I think there are definitely different themes that can pop up. Obviously, some are really personal, but like, for example, sitting in a medicine circle and taking a 𝗙𝗘𝗔𝗧𝗨𝗥𝗘𝗗, which is a certain strain of psilocybin mushroom. I've had much more Mexican indigenous visualizations with a specific strain that's native to Mexico. And whether that's because I knew it was from Mexico or not, I was just shocked at how different those visuals were and how much more in tune it seemed to be with the culture and the type of pottery and art they create there.
I kind of got tons of questions to ask, and again, we can go off on a tangent on this subject as well. But you mentioned about you wanted to see a moose, right? Yeah. Which you did. Now, could you suggest, because I guess you're calling out to the universe or your consciousness or your inner self or your higher self. I mean, as an example, could I say, I want to visualize myself somewhere else in the galaxy, and would I then have these visions or the images of that?
A great question. I mean, I also think it depends on how much of a substance you took, right? And how much control that you felt like you had over that. You can definitely ask for that, but at the end of the day, releasing control to maybe not seeing that might be really important. Yeah. But you totally could. I've gone into journeys with the intention of, will you please show me X? And I've absolutely been granted that. And whether it's my mind doing that or a gift being given to me from the universe, I don't know. But either way, it's always a beautiful experience. Yeah,
because I see lots of connections here between hypnotherapy, dream state, and spirituality, and all of this kind of working together. Now, I would ask, maybe take me back to a previous time and show me something there and see if my mind would do that. Right?
That would be really interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I'm also like trying this out and seeing, like, I've never done it, and lots of friends have. Mm-hmm. And yeah, I think it could blow your mind, as in exciting. But I think you have to know what you're doing, like anything. I mean, you're not just going to rush out there and start eating a ton of mushrooms or whatever you do with them.
Yeah, I don't recommend rushing out and eating a ton of mushrooms. I recommend the education process. I recommend understanding what's best for your body. There's a ton of great resources out there on all of that. And, some people, they have never done mushrooms before, and they dive right into a macrodose journey. And that's a beautiful experience for so many people, or they dive right into an ayahuasca circle, having never taken a psychoactive substance. And that's great. That works for a ton of people. I would just say, do your research, your due diligence, talk to other people first, go to integration circles to see how people are processing it.
Yeah, so I love like what you do, what Casey does, and others, because it's a gradual, controlled, and educational way to do it, rather than like being the naive and making the mistakes or having a bad experience.
Mm-hmm. Well, and, I think there's a lot of things to be said for kind of changing the nomenclature there of, we often hear, a bad trip or bad experience, and the image pops in our mind about the egg and the frying pan and the war on drugs, especially here in the US. And I would say that we should change that a little bit and say there are no bad experiences. There are challenging experiences. Because I think even from these challenging experiences, with proper integration, we can take something that's truly beneficial for us.
Yeah, you could see the worm in the tequila.
Yes. Tell me more about what you mean by that.
Isn't there supposed to be a worm in it?
Yes, there is in the tequila bottle.
So you say, I can see a worm in my tequila. And I say, yeah, so can I. There's always one in there.
There's always one.
It's when you can't see it in there. Actually, in the notes, you mentioned also about dinosaurs. So what was your fascination with dinosaurs?
That's a great question. I was raised definitely to be more of a tomboy, and I just grew up watching Land Before Time. I probably have watched that 200 or 300 times. And I just think it's so special. I mean, I did not know this as a kid, but the true fascination that something has existed so long before us is amazing. But what kid isn't obsessed with dinosaurs? It's like, it's either dinosaurs and cars or dolls and babies. And I was more of the dinosaurs and cars kid. And I mean, it's just a fantasy, magical thing that they actually existed.
Could you not ask next time and say, instead of seeing a moose, you see a T-Rex or something?
A T-Rex. I don't know if I would want to see a T-Rex when I'm tripping.
Well, then maybe those plant-eating ones with the long necks.
Some kind of cute dinosaur that I could ride, and it would be like a prehistoric horse. That would be honestly pretty awesome. Yeah. I would not want to see a T-Rex while I was on acid.
No, I mean, I do bedtime storytelling with my kids, and we have stories, and they love dinosaurs as well. And my daughter loves the one, I can't remember the name, with the long neck. And then
Yeah.
they play like the slide down the neck as a slide, and the dinosaur helps them get back up. And yeah, I think all kids love dinosaurs.
I do too. I think it's a sense of magic. It's a sense of fantasy, and kids haven't lost that obsession yet, which is really beautiful. Their brains and imaginations can go there, and then we get older and we're just like, oh yeah, that happened. That's great.
Yeah, absolutely. And you touched on something there, imagination and creativity. I mean, Einstein said that we're all born with it and we don't suppress it. And yeah, it's suppressed from being at school and everything, because as soon as you think outside the box or do something different, then you have to get back in the box to be conform with the others. So I think when you have a trip with mushrooms or whatever, any psychedelics, then you're kind of leaving the inhibitions and the box behind, and you're really exploring your mind, basically.
I love exploring my mind. I think that's one of the reasons I keep going back. After that LSD experience continued to open me to the possibilities. I would take it recreationally at music festivals, and just the imagination and creativity that came out of those places I was blown away by. And eventually I just had the calling to journey a little deeper and do a macrodose experience, and it completely changed my relationship with the plants.
Right. So now, I mean, is this something that you teach on as well and give classes on?
Good question. I do not give any classes on this. There are a lot of classes out there, depending on what you're looking for, with people who dedicate their entire lives to this, whether it's growing mushrooms or teaching people to be integration facilitators, or even people teaching other people how to guide and do journey work. I will say that I volunteer for an organization called PsiloHealth, where we focus on education, legislation, and integration of psilocybin-based experiences. And I did teach Unit 8 of our psilocybin peer support program, which is about the ethics of supporting a peer and facilitating a journey like that. And it's a wonderful program that's free to the public if anybody's interested.
Definitely share kind of links to that.
I will.
But there's a couple of more things I want to touch on. Otherwise, we'll be here all night. So you do retreats, and you do your own podcast. So yes. Which order would you like to do it in?
Great question. We can talk about the retreats first. So okay. I support PsiloHealth in building our in-person retreats, which we don't call them retreats. We actually call them approachments. And a lot of that is around language of veterans. For example, the word retreat can be a little triggering, and retreat kind of means to go back and to go inwards and all of that. And we use the word approachment to really describe to come to.
Actually, if you think about it, retreat is like going back, right? We retreat, we're going to go back. We can't come forward. We have to go backwards.
Yes. And so approachment is more like we're going to come towards something. And really the goal of these approachments is to get together in a space of healing and integration. And we had one last year in a beautiful place in Florida near St. Pete's Beach. We have another one coming up in September that's going to be in this beautiful glass house in Pennsylvania. And I kind of support all the organizing of that. And then there's a few other folks and individuals who ask me to come along and support from yoga.
So when you support, you're kind of the facilitator, or you offer something as well?
So I offer something as well. And I would say that there's not necessarily ever one facilitator in these. We have a lot of different facilitators who have different specialties and backgrounds, like breath work or altar building or art therapy and or sound bowl healing, for example. And I'm just here as one of those facilitators.
Wow. And how long do these last?
Anywhere between, I've done 2 nights up to 7 nights. So it really depends on the type of retreat.
So you do your own, or you're part of a group?
I'm part of a group that does it. I would love to lead my own eventually, but right now I'm part of a group that does different retreats. And it's honestly a beautiful collaborative experience.
No, I love it. I mean, I think all companies should do it. I mean, it's better to send them away on doing something like this than necessarily just give them a bonus or whatever. So yes. We're going to forfeit your bonus, but instead we're going to give you something that's much more valuable.
Yeah, I mean, these kinds of experiences stay with you forever. I think money comes and goes, but these experiences are what compounds individuals in becoming
no, absolutely. I mean, these are life changing, but also a lifetime memory.
Yes.
Like if someone gave you a bonus, then I mean, it could be gone on a new car or whatever you want to spend it on. But something like this is much more memorable and much more meaningful.
I agree. I agree.
So let's just kind of wrap up with podcasting. So how did you get into that? What do you do? Who are your typical guests? And we have one guest in common.
Yes, we do. Casey. So I've always wanted to do a podcast. I say always, I would say like the last 5 to 6 years, I was really thinking about it. And everyone has a podcast nowadays, and there's so many good ones out there. And so 𝗙𝗘𝗔𝗧𝗨𝗥𝗘𝗗, the founder of PsiloHealth, he called me out of the blue one day to kind of explain his awesome vision for the company. And he goes, "Have you ever wanted to do a podcast?" And I go, "Yeah, but I didn't really know what to do it on." And he goes, "Why don't you do one for PsiloHealth? And we can make it about elevating people's voices in the entheogenic space who are doing some grassroots projects and some really awesome work." And I thought that would be amazing. And so a lot of our guests are working in the plant medicine space, whether it's with ayahuasca, mostly psilocybin or marijuana. And they're doing anything from research work, they're doctors, they're lawyers. We have people on that are coordinating psychedelic science conferences. We have people who talk about microdosing like Casey did. We have people who come on and talk about guiding macrodose experiences. And so it's kind of all things psilocybin based.
Wow.
Yeah.
And when did you start?
We started recently. So we have 5 episodes so far, and I have about 2 or 3 more in the works that I'm currently editing. And we started about, I would say, 6 months ago.
Right. And you have a YouTube channel?
We do have a YouTube channel. It's PsiloHealth is our YouTube channel. And then the podcast is called PsiloPod, and that's PsiloPod.
Right. You have to share all of these links so people can check it out and join. Yeah, and then follow. I mean, I'm definitely going to follow you and see if I can poach some of your guests.
Yeah, please do. I'll do the same thing to you.
I mean, mine's slightly different. I mean, I don't focus on any particular subject. I want it to be as diverse as possible. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, even some taboo subjects, or this is kind of classed as kind of taboo in some people's minds, but to others, they welcome it. But it's all up to the individuals that watch if they want to enjoy it or want to watch it or not. So, yeah, it's a choice. I'm just the host.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's weird sometimes that this is considered taboo. All the psychedelic and plant medicine space is so normal to me at this point that I kind of forget how some people.
Yeah. No. I think it's an education. I mean, we kind of grow up being told that this is bad for you, this is wrong and whatever. So then your mindset is believing that anything about that is going to be wrong. Mm-hmm. But it's an education. If you understand, I mean, like anything, I mean, you can be addicted to it or not. You can do it in small portions. You can do it just to highlight your sense or to emphasize your senses and no more than that. Or you can really go on a psychedelic trip and talk to the trees. So it depends on what you want. I mean, it's the same as alcohol. I mean, I can be a casual alcohol drinker as a social thing, or I could be an alcoholic, right? So.
Well, that's really interesting that you compare it like that. I look at mushrooms and alcohol as very different. And unlike alcohol, mushrooms are not addictive. In fact, the more that you take and more frequently, your brain actually stops picking up that compound. So you actually cannot get addicted to psilocybin like you can with alcohol. So I understand how you're comparing the two. I would say that they're very, very different. And I would say that mushrooms are also a lot safer. For example, you can overdose on alcohol and there's been no reported overdoses on mushrooms ever. So they're very safe for most individuals.
Which is great because, as I said at the beginning, it's all about education.
It is.
So you can educate people on that and it gets them to think differently. Mm-hmm. Right. I'm a chocolate addict.
I
love chocolate.
Me too. All kinds.
If this is one big family bar of chocolate in the cupboard, I will sneak there, right, and take the first like 4 bits off the end, right? But because now I've opened it, I can't keep away.
I know, and then you have white chocolate, which just does no good to the chocolate family. It's not real chocolate. I don't know why we call it chocolate, but you got to go milk or dark.
Exactly. Mine's definitely milk.
Yes.
My wife is dark and sometimes white, but mine is just milk.
You know,
I could do a whole show on chocolate. I mean, I love the stuff.
I mean, I'm here for it. And dark chocolate and 100% pure cacao is a beautiful pairing to microdosing. No,
I would. But anyway, we digress, because I lived in Amsterdam for 5 years. So I could talk about lots of stories there about kind of coffee shops and experience and some wonderful cakes.
Mm-hmm.
But that's another story. So yeah, I absolutely love what you do. And with your podcasts, I mean, how frequent are they?
So they've been about once a month. I would love to get to a bi-monthly where I'm posting twice a month, but right now they're once a month and hoping to ramp up that cadence a little bit.
And finding guests in kind of your area is not a problem?
Yeah, not a problem. I feel like myself and a couple the individuals that I work with are pretty well connected to some amazing, beautiful individuals who have a lot of great things to say. So it's been great so far. Haven't run out of guests yet, and have a lot still.
But this could be global as well. You
Absolutely,
could have global guests.
Anyone is welcome. Yes.
And Casey, how did you find Casey?
Casey is really good friends with 𝗙𝗘𝗧𝗨𝗥𝗘𝗗, the founder of PsiloHealth, and I would let them share the story about how they met, but they know each other, and 𝗙𝗘𝗧𝗨𝗥𝗘𝗗 introduced me to Casey.
Did you listen to her on my recording with her?
I have not yet, but it is on my to-do list.
Yeah. So because I think this subject is very fascinating, I would like to invite you back, and Casey and anyone else kind of in that circle of what you're doing as a panel discussion, so we can open this up and have some fun.
I'm totally here for it.
And particularly questions, because in my naivety, I don't want to die of ignorance, and not know. I would rather ask, even if I think it's a silly question. It's only a silly question if you don't know the answer, or whatever. So,
yeah, sometimes, yeah.
Right. Yeah. I mean, if you know the answer, it's easy. But I mean, I don't, so I feel silly. But I mean, yeah, it's about.
And sometimes we don't have to have the answers. Sometimes a question can be questioned with a question, and then you're just questioning each other, and that's a great way to have a conversation too.
Yeah, exactly. And as you say, there's kind of no right or wrong. It's what you believe is right for you.
Yes.
So, Hannah,
James,
you have been an absolutely wonderful guest, our 124th guest. So you've got a few more to catch up.
Yes, I sure do. About 119.
And even I mean, although I don't really talk about, I mean, to be a guest on your show, I don't know if that would be appropriate or not, but I mean, I'd be more than happy if you wanted me as a guest on your show, and I can share my experiences. Yeah,
you seem to know a lot about frequencies, vibrations. I know you said you do some shamanic work, so we would absolutely love to have you on.
Yeah, I can tell you how I got into shamanic work, and I can tell you how my crystal picked me.
That would be amazing.
Yes, which is really quite magical, but we'll save that for another day.
Okay.
So, Hannah, you've been fantastic. All right.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
It's been a great pleasure. I love your work. We're going to share the links so other people can follow you and reach out. I'll also connect and put all the links in there. And I wish you a wonderful weekend.
Thank you. And thank you for all the work you're doing and having me on. Have a wonderful weekend.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, bye.
Bye.
Wow, that was another featured business brought to you by Visibility Impact. If you'd like to be our next featured guest or learn how James Mofat can help you leverage on the art and power of interactive storytelling for your business, reach out and schedule a call now.